Welcome back to the final episode of APPL-i's Cut to the Case series, where we help viewers gain a basic understanding of how case studies work. In our previous episode, we discussed the basics of profitability, solved and understood guesstimates, and made introductions to basic accounting. In today's episode, we combine concepts from our previous two episodes with a case that shows how critical thinking and general awareness are crucial to cases. We will be taking up the case of the Jamaican battery enterprise from Constantino's Case in Point book. This is the third and final episode, and today we will be putting together a case with previously explained concepts of market entry, profits, and competition.
Good evening. Our client is a Jamaican battery enterprise. Currently, they sell car batteries throughout the Caribbean, Africa, and Central and South America. Over the past 2 decades, they have been eyeing the Cuban battery market. However, Cuban Battery Enterprise, a state-owned battery company, currently has 100% of the secondary market. The reason they have 100% of the secondary market is that the Cuban government imposes a 50% tariff on the manufacturing cost and shipping cost on all the imported batteries. The Cuban government has just announced it will be lowering the tariff on batteries by 5% a year for the next 10 years until the tariff reaches zero. The Jamaican Battery Board of Directors wants to know the size of the Cuban market and if, when, and how they should enter it.
So, in summary, the board of directors of the Jamaican Battery Company want to know the size of the Cuban market and if, when, and how they should enter it. We know that currently the Cuban battery market is dominated by the Cuban battery enterprise because of a 50% tariff on the manufacturing and shipping costs on all imported batteries. But we also know that the government is lowering the tariff by 5% a year for the next 10 years until the tariff reaches zero. Is that it?
Yes, that's right.
So I'll
Yes.
assume that the objective is to gain market share and be profitable. Are there any other objectives that I should know of?
No.
Okay, so what is the market share that they can reasonably expect to gain and under what timetable if the company has an estimate?
So assume 25% within 5 years of entering.
Okay, so let's start by estimating the size of the Cuban secondary car battery market. I'll assume that there are 10 million people in Cuba.
That's a little low, but a good figure to use.
And then I'll also assume that the disposable income is limited and that only 1%, like only 1 in 10 households, have a car. So if we estimate the average Cuban household, it's made up of 5 people. And
Where did you get the 5 from?
so I'm assuming that there are 2 generations living in a number of in a number of homes. So that's why 5.
Okay.
And then so if there are 2 million households and if only 1 in 10 have a car, that means that there are 200,000 cars. I would also like to add in around, say, 10,000 extra vehicles, which includes taxis, trucks, and government vehicles.
So 100,000 vehicles.
Yes, and I'll also assume that Cubans keep their cars for a long time and that the average car needs a new battery every 3 years.
3 years. What were you thinking when you made that assumption?
So actually, I was assuming that since it's a monopoly in a communist country, the quality of the battery might not be competitive with a Jamaican battery, which probably, say, lasts 5 years. So that was the assumption I made.
Now, this part right here really changes the interview. It shows whether the candidate can think on her feet and connect knowledge to real world cases. What are monopolistic markets? A market structure characterized by a single seller selling a unique product in the market. In a monopoly market, the seller faces no competition as he or she is the sole seller of goods with no close substitute. This means that all the consumers of the product will have to buy their goods from this one monopolist who can charge very high prices for the goods. Communist nations that favor state ownership of businesses often see monopolies build up. However, as these are government run enterprises, they need to keep their prices in check unless they want to face major rebellion. Yet, due to lack of competition, the quantity of such goods can be expected to be way below the international standard. The candidate makes a good connection with the fact which shows great thinking capacity. It is important to note that businesses and consultants must keep in touch with the political landscape of the world in order to be able to grasp socioeconomic aspects of the market that they operate in.
Go on.
So that is 210,000 vehicles, which will need a new battery every 3 years. But there are two factors that we need to figure in. First, let's say that half of the 10,000 other vehicles that we mentioned are government or military vehicles. So we need to subtract 5,000 of the total. So now it's 205,000 divided by every 3 years, which equals to 68,000 batteries. So why I did this was actually because I believe that, the 5,000 that we subtracted, they will continue to use the locally produced batteries, and they would not shift easily. So that was the assumption I made. And finally, the number is going to be reduced over the long run because our batteries will last 5 years and not 3. But I'm not sure how to factor that in exactly.
That's okay. It's just important that you brought it up.
Yeah, so then on the whole, I feel like if we want 25% of the market, we're talking around 17,000 batteries in a year.
Okay, what's next?
So I'd like to know about costs and prices. What are the costs and prices like ours compared to theirs?
So prices are irrelevant, but the costs aren't. It costs the Cuban battery enterprise around $12 to produce a battery. The raw material costs are 20%, the labor costs are 50%, and the overhead and all of the costs are 30%. It costs us $9 to produce a battery. Our raw material costs are 20%, labor costs around 25%, and all other costs, including overhead and marketing, are around 55%. It costs us $1 to ship it to Cuba.
So let me just write this out and tabulate it. Oh, okay. So this means that it costs us $9 manufacturing plus $1 shipping, which equals to $10. And in the 50% tariff, we are talking about a $15 battery. We now need to figure out when we will be competitive. So in 5 years, the tariff will drop from 50% to 25%, which is half. So it will cost us $10 to manufacture and ship the battery. However, the tariff will now only be $2.5. So that makes our total of around $12.5. So I would say, based on sheer numbers, we can enter and compete during year 6. But if we can market and explain that for a little bit more, our battery will last 5 years and instead of 3 years, we might be able to charge a premium, and that could justify entering the market earlier, say maybe in year 5 itself.
So what exactly does a candidate mean by saying that they could enter the market in year 5 or year 6? So when it comes to entering a new market that has been close to the competitors for so long, there are more factors to consider than just the price. A competitor that enters the new market in an early stage when the options are low and the prices are relatively down will have a huge advantage. They will have a chance to set up the facilities and operational channels at maybe the cheapest prices possible and establish themselves first, which could be a huge plus when it comes to the market share.
Okay, so let's switch hat for a second. You are now advising the Cuban battery enterprise. What do you advise them?
So my first step is to approach the government and try to get them to reconsider lowering the tariff. But of course, if that does not happen, next I would find out why our labor costs are so high.
Why do you think?
So the first two things that jump to my mind are technology and medical costs. Maybe our technology is old and our manufacturing process is very labor intensive. So that would be my first guess.
Yes, that's part of it. Go ahead.
So I feel when it comes to this, we can't do much about healthcare costs, but we can upgrade our technology. That upgrade could also make our batteries more competitive and able to last 5 years instead of 3 years.
Say we upgrade our technology and are now able to make a world-class battery for $9 a battery. How would that change things?
The tariff becomes moot in the sense that we can be competitive without it. This is good, but we still have a perception problem. I think we need to launch a marketing campaign to show the Cuban public that we have a new battery that is world class. I'd also like to review our customer service and our distribution channels. These are key functions that are often overlooked in a monopoly environment.
Good point. So our customer service is pitiful, and our distribution channels are restricted to two major warehouses, one in Havana and the other one in New Vitas. You said that you would launch a marketing campaign, and I'll assume that there will be a customer service aspect to that. What would you do about the distribution channels?
So I'll make two assumptions. First, I'll assume that we have at least 2 years before the Jamaican battery company enters our market. Second, I'll assume that other non-American battery companies will also enter our market, probably at the same time and with a similar strategy to the Jamaican companies.
Another great note, the closer you can get to a real world scenario and actions in a case, the better it is. It would be strange if other companies did not enter the potential market just like our client did. It's very important to think of what all the other competitors are doing and what they might do in the future. It's only by factoring in the competition that consultants can formulate strategies that put the clients ahead of its rivals. Michael Porter identified mainly 4 stages of competitive strategy. A company strategy of selling its product at a price lower than the competitors is known as a cost leadership strategy. The emphasis is placed on the production of standardized products at a low per unit cost for price-sensitive customers. Charging lower prices becomes possible when the company can ensure cost reduction by operating businesses in a highly cost-effective manner. The goal of a differentiation strategy is to achieve a competitive advantage by offering a unique product to the customer. When a product becomes unique due to differentiation, it becomes attractive to the customers. However, the differences made in the product must be of value. A product with differentiated features can command a premium prices. That is, a price that is way above the industry average. As a concept, best cost means highest quality at the lowest price of a product. The term is used to indicate a situation where the company tries to achieve the lowest cost term relative to the competitors who offer a very similar product and simultaneously try to improve the product quality. For example, Toyota's Lexus car pitted against the Mercedes-Benz. A focus strategy involves offering the niche customers a product customized to their own tastes and requirements. It is directed towards serving the needs of a very limited customer group. A company usually follows a focus strategy when it can serve a narrow piece of market for better than all its competitors. Coca-Cola Company has introduced Diet Cola to serve the niche market consisting of diabetic customers. Kohinoor Chemical Company, for its Tibet Snow, initially used a niche strategy particularly directed towards the rural women. So companies do not offer specific strength, they leverage like the core competencies, vertical integrations to acquisitions, etc. However, these 4 are a good starting point to build the concept of a competitive advantage.
Both fair assumptions.
Taking them forward. First, I would go to every gas station on the island, both in the city and in the countryside. I would, front them the cost of the batteries, give them a nice display rack, free T-shirts, and maybe some cash. So some freebies, and in return, they would have to sign an exclusive agreement to sell only our batteries. So I have a question actually. Does the government make its own tires? And if yes, how is the quality?
Yes, they do, but the quality is poor. However, based on your advice, they will also upgrade their technology and launch a marketing plan because the tire tariff is being eliminated as well.
So you know what I'm getting at, right? We can open a service store where residents can get both a new battery and new tires and maybe an oil change. We can snap up all the best locations before the foreign competitors come into our market. So basically a bundled approach to it.
Great. We are switching hats again. We are now back to advising the Jamaican battery company. You have seen that the Cuban battery enterprise has upgraded its plant, increased its distribution channels, formed a joint venture with the Cuban tire enterprise, and launched a nationalistic marketing campaign. Do you now enter the Cuban battery market, and if so, how?
So as they are following very rigidly my own strategies, I would feel that whenever we enter a new market, there are several things you need to examine. So first would be who are the major players, then what size market share do they have, how are their products or services different from us, and are there any barriers to entry. The major player, of course, is the Cuban battery enterprise. They have 100% of the market. 2 years ago, their products were inferior, but today they are very similar. The tariff was a barrier to entry, but now it looks as if access to distribution channels could be a threat. So I've learned that there are three main ways to enter a market: starting from scratch, buy your way in, or form a joint venture. So I'd like to do a quick cost benefit analysis of each. Starting from scratch would be a fine strategy if we can define our distribution channels. If the Cuban company has all the gas stations tied up and built tires and battery stores, then our distribution means are very limited. Plus, selling 17,000 batteries a year might not justify the investment of building our own battery stores. Then the second strategy, which is to buy our way in. Since this is a communist country, there isn't a lot of buying opportunity. If we are going to buy anyone, it would have been Cuban battery enterprise. And we should have brought it when it was a mess and not a formidable competitor. And finally, the third way is to form a joint venture. If I work under the assumption that there are no independent battery distributors, then my first choice is to form a joint venture with one of the tire companies and that are entering the market. My guess is that there will be several tire companies and battery companies jumping in, so we need to be a part of that coalition.
So it all boils down to?
So it all boils down to mainly distribution channels.
Great job. Thank you.
The case discussed in this episode is quite unique because it makes the person play from both sides of the problem. Like first from the Jamaican enterprise, then from the Cuban enterprise, and then back again from the Jamaican enterprise, all the while using the candidate to battle against their own strategies. Another important consideration in this case is that it talks about using of manufacturing processes which involves a lot of maths and calculations, and this makes it very close to a real life scenario. Apart from that, it also shows how important awareness and common sense is, and that applying logic, such as how monopoly leads to a fall in quality, etc., are subtle nuances that differentiate a good candidate from an average one. In this case, we discussed the four types of competitive strategies put forward by Michael Porter, along with their explanations, relevant examples, and applications. First of all, we discussed the cost leadership strategy, in which the emphasis is placed on production of a standardized product at low per unit cost for price sensitive customers. Next, we discussed differentiation strategy, whose goal was to achieve a competitive advantage by offering a unique differentiated product. The third strategy we discussed was best cost strategy, whose concept is offering high quality goods with low price for the same product. Then, the last strategy we discussed was the focus strategy, which involves offering niche customers a product customized to their own tastes and requirements, and it is directed towards serving the needs of a limited customer group. We also discussed how these four strategies have different applications in different scenarios in detail.